I had just hung up the phone when the familiar heaviness settled in my chest. That call with Hector, like so many before, left me with a strange aftertaste. We spoke about our grandson's upcoming birthday, shared a laugh about Diego's obsession with toy dinosaurs, and exchanged polite well wishes like two old acquaintances. But even in that mundane exchange, something always lingered, something like guilt, like grief, like loss I hadn't fully named. It was ridiculous, I know. Hector and I divorced over a year ago. Technically, we had no reason to talk. And yet, we still did, especially when it came to family things. Sophia, our daughter, had grown into her own life in Austin. She had a husband, a child, and a pace of living I could no longer keep up with. And Hector, well, Hector still sent gifts on Diego's birthday, always asking what kind of toy would make his little eyes light up. He liked wiring money into Diego's savings account and hearing about school projects. I suppose, in his own way, he was trying. I stepped out into the quiet yard behind my house, the late afternoon sun throwing soft light over the empty garden beds. My fingers brushed the edge of a dried lavender bush, and for a second, I was 17 again, standing in line at the campus cafeteria, complaining about cinnamon rolls. It's funny what memory chooses to keep. Back then, I was just another student at the community college in San Antonio. Quiet, bookish, always clutching a sweater or a folder too tightly. Hector and I were in the same economics program. I barely noticed him for the first semester. He was too quiet, too pale, always scribbling something in the margins of his notebook. I was chasing boys older than me, ones who wore leather jackets and had their own cars. Hector? He was the kid who blended into the walls. Until one Thursday afternoon, just before a long weekend, I dragged my best friend Rosa into the cafeteria in search of my favorite cinnamon roll. If they're out again, I groaned dramatically, I swear I'll starve. They were out again. I remember the genuine pout on my face as I turned away from the counter, defeated. That cinnamon roll had become my ritual, my comfort in a life that didn't yet make sense. I didn't know Hector had overheard. 15 minutes later, just as Rosa and I were sulking at our table, a slightly breathless boy appeared with a paper bag. His hair was tousled, cheeks flushed, and in his hands was a warm cinnamon roll, fresh from the bakery across the street. He slid it in front of me without a word. "For you," he mumbled. "I thought you might want one." I blinked at him. Then I blinked at the roll. Then slowly I smiled. In that moment, something shifted. For the first time, I really saw him. Not just the quiet student with smart eyes, but someone kind. Someone who listened. That simple gesture said more than any compliment ever could. No charm, no game. Just sincerity wrapped in wax paper and sugar. From then on, I started noticing him. The way his hands moved when he took notes, the quiet humor in his comments during class discussions, the way he smiled, soft and hesitant, like he never expected anyone to smile back. We began sitting together, then studying, then walking each other home from campus. It wasn't long before I was tucking notes into his backpack and waiting for his text messages like they were lifelines. Hector had nothing, not money, not style, not a car. But he had something rare, attentiveness. He noticed things no one else did, and he made me feel visible. In a world where I always felt like a background character, Hector gave me a spotlight. Sometimes, when the wind catches the scent of cinnamon in the air, I think of that day, of the way his fingers trembled just slightly when he handed me that bag, and the look in his eyes when I smiled. It wasn't love at first sight. It was slower, deeper, something that rooted itself gently and never quite let go. That's what makes everything harder now. The weight of all those shared beginnings and the silence that replaced them. I leaned against the old garden bench, pulled my shawl tighter and let the wind touch my face. Somewhere out there, Hector was probably texting Sophia about party decorations or looking at action figures online. And me? I was here, tangled in memory, wondering how something so small, so sweet, could be the beginning of a lifetime, and the end of it too. Even now, I still dream of cinnamon rolls. I didn't mean to get pregnant. It wasn't part of the plan. But nothing in our life ever followed a plan anyway. I was 20, still in school, still trying to figure out who I was. But when I held that test in my hand, two pink lines staring back at me like a door I hadn't meant to open, I didn't feel fear, not right away. I felt wonder, and a strange, impossible kind of joy. That night, I dreamed of a little girl with golden curls and gray eyes just like Hector's. I woke up knowing, deep down, that it was true. Our daughter was already with us. Her name would be Sophia. We were too young, too broke, too tired. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment that leaked when it rained, and neither of us had health insurance. But we made it work. Hector switched to night classes and picked up shifts as a delivery driver for a construction supply company. I studied while breastfeeding. We ate too much rice and canned soup. Our bed was a mattress on the floor. But those were some of the happiest years of my life. Hector never once complained. Not when Sophia cried through the night. Not when the car broke down in the middle of a thunderstorm. Not when I cried in the grocery store because we didn't have enough for diapers and milk. He just held me and figured things out. He was the kind of man who believed that if you couldn't go through something, you went around it or over it or tunneled straight beneath it. He found a way. Eventually, things got better. Hector was promoted from driver to inventory manager, then again to assistant buyer. I got a part-time job at a dental clinic while Sophia started preschool. We began saving just a little, just enough. And then one day we walked into a rundown apartment in a better neighborhood and signed the lease with shaky hands and matching smiles. It was ours, our first home. We painted the walls dusty sage and soft cream. I picked out second-hand curtains from a thrift store and made throw pillows by hand. Hector bought a used microwave and was so proud, he kept the receipt folded in his wallet for a year. I still remember the way the morning light fell across the tiny kitchen table. How Sophia would sit there with juice-stained lips and giggle while I packed her lunch. How Hector would kiss me on the forehead before heading out the door, always turning back one last time, like he couldn't bear to look away too quickly. We had no money for vacations or fine dining. Our date nights were frozen pizza and old movies on a borrowed laptop. But we laughed. God, we laughed so much. He had this ridiculous way of doing voices for every cartoon character Sophia liked. Even now, I can hear his Donald Duck impression echoing through the bathroom while he helped her brush her teeth. Sometimes, we'd take the bus to the public library just for the air conditioning and let Sophia run wild in the children's section. Sometimes he'd bring me flowers from the gas station and whisper, "They're cheap, but they're stubborn, just like us." Eventually, Hector opened his first small shop, selling hardware supplies. It was barely profitable at first, but it gave him purpose. He'd sweep the floors every morning himself, check inventory 3 times a day, and come home with sawdust in his hair and a grin like he just won the lottery. He built that business like he built our life, one small step at a time. By the time Sophia was 10, we weren't poor anymore. We weren't rich, but we were steady. I remember the day we signed the mortgage for our first house, a real house with a porch and a fenced-in yard and a garden that I dreamed would someday be filled with lavender and sunflowers. That day, I cried in the car. Hector didn't ask why. He just reached over, took my hand, and said, "We made it." And I believed him. There was a rhythm to our life, a sense of forward motion, of things being okay. We were still young, still in love, still dreaming about maybe one day having another baby now that things were easier. But life doesn't always wait for your timing. Sometimes it hands you the impossible just when you start to breathe again. We didn't know that the hardest chapter was already waiting just around the corner. And we sure as hell didn't know how much it would cost. It started with dizziness. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I was working part-time again, helping out at the clinic 3 mornings a week, and Sophia had just left for college in Austin. The house felt too quiet, and I filled it with busy work, organizing drawers that didn't need organizing, baking pies we never finished, watering the garden twice a day. But then I started losing weight. My appetite vanished. I couldn't stand for long without feeling lightheaded. I brushed it off like most women do. Maybe hormones, maybe age, maybe just loneliness curling its fingers too tight around my chest. Hector noticed, of course. He always noticed. "You're fading," he said one night as I pushed peas around my plate. "You used to eat like a trucker." I laughed. I always laughed when I didn't want to cry. But a week later, I nearly collapsed in the grocery store. And Hector didn't laugh. He called the best medical center in the county, pulled every string he had, and drove me there himself. I'll never forget the way he gripped the steering wheel on that drive, jaw tight, knuckles white, refusing to meet my eyes at red lights. He was scared, and that scared me more than anything. The tests came quickly. Blood work, scans, more scans. And then silence. That strange kind of hospital silence where the world feels padded and the lights are too bright and the walls too thin to hold the weight of what's coming. When the doctor finally spoke, I heard only pieces. Words like mass, aggressive, early treatment. I felt something inside me shrink, like a candle being snuffed out mid-burn. I was sick, and not the kind of sick you shake off with soup and sleep. I was really, truly sick. And just like that, everything shifted. The garden went wild. Mail piled up. The scent of cinnamon rolls made me nauseous. Hector turned the guest room into a recovery space with a recliner, a humidifier, and a stack of books I never opened. And then came the surgeries, the treatments, the endless fog of medications and follow-ups and waiting rooms that smelled like bleach and old coffee. For years of white walls and whispered prayers, of counting the good days and surviving the bad ones. Hector was there through it all. Every appointment, every night of fevers, every whispered, "I can't do this," when the nausea wrapped around my ribs like wire. He didn't flinch. He never ran. He shaved my head when the hair started falling out. He bathed me when I couldn't lift my arms. He cried once, just once, when he thought I was asleep. I remember the sound of it, soft, choked, the kind of cry you never want to hear from someone who once carried your whole world. And for all of it, I loved him more. I loved him not because he stayed, but because he stayed gently, because he held me without needing to fix me, because he made me feel like I was still whole when my own body had betrayed me. But sickness, it takes more than just your strength. It takes pieces of your identity, your marriage, your intimacy. And sometimes you don't notice what it's taken until it's too late. By the time I finally went into remission, something between us had shifted. He smiled less, laughed less. His hugs felt thinner, his silences heavier. I chalked it up to exhaustion. We were both tired. We had both fought the same war, just from different sides of the battlefield. I never asked if he was okay. I wish I had. Because while I was learning how to live again, something else in our life was already starting to die. And I never even heard it breaking. It was a Friday afternoon when everything came undone. Hector came home early that day, practically glowing. "Guess what?" he said, beaming as he walked through the front door. "I just signed a deal with the top supplier in Texas. This changes everything," I say. I smiled for him. I did. I knew how long he'd worked for that contract, how many years he'd poured into growing the business from nothing. I was proud of him, truly. Even if lately we'd become more like housemates than soulmates, I still wanted to see him happy. He was so excited that I told him to go unwind, head across the street and share the news with Peter, our neighbor, and his longtime drinking buddy. "You've earned a few hours of celebration," I said, pressing a cold bottle of soda into his hand. He kissed my forehead and left in a rush. I stayed behind, planning to read in the sunroom. But then I saw his phone buzzing on the table. He'd forgotten it again. Classic Hector. I picked it up, intending to silence it, but the name on the screen froze me in place. Michael P. I didn't recognize the name, but the number called again, and again, and again. Something about it didn't sit right. I told myself not to be ridiculous. Maybe it was a business partner. Maybe someone from the supplier's office. But when the phone rang for the fourth time in less than 10 minutes, instinct overrode reason. I answered. What I expected was the voice of an older man. What I got was a young woman. Breezy, impatient, familiar. There you are, she sighed into the line. I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Bad news, my passport's expired. Our Cyprus trip might be off unless your guy can pull strings. Come on, baby. I've been dying to get away with you. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of my marriage unraveling in real time. The woman paused. Hector, why are you so quiet? I swallowed hard, but my voice came out calm. Too calm. This is Isabella, Hector's wife. Silence. Then a soft, awkward laugh. Oh, well, I guess now you know. She hung up. That was it. No explanation. No apology. Just now you know. I stared at the phone in my hand. My fingers were numb, but my heart was a wildfire. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I walked to the wall and hurled the phone as hard as I could. It hit the bookshelf, bounced onto the hardwood, and cracked the corner of a photo frame, the one of our wedding day. Hector came home later that night, smelling like beer and victory. I was already on the couch, pretending to be asleep beneath a throw blanket. I couldn't face him, not yet. I needed time to understand what had just happened, or rather, what had been happening behind my back for God knows how long. He kissed the top of my head as he passed, a gesture that used to make me feel safe. Now it made my skin crawl. He went upstairs. Minutes later, I heard the familiar rhythm of his snoring, but sleep wouldn't come for me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of betrayal breathing peacefully above me, and wondering how I had missed all the signs. The next morning, the sky was a dull, colorless gray, like even the sun didn't have the courage to show its face. I was already in the kitchen when Hector stumbled down the stairs, yawning and rubbing his eyes. He kissed my cheek on reflex, then reached for the coffee pot. I didn't flinch, didn't move. I just watched him butter his toast like he had every morning for the past 30 years. He glanced at me, frowning. You okay? You look off. I set my mug down slowly. Michael P., I said. The words dropped like stones between us. His hand froze mid-spread. The knife clattered onto the plate. He blinked. Once. Twice. What? He asked, too quickly. She called yesterday, I said. From your phone. Talking about Cyprus. Calling you baby. Silence. Hector sat down, his eyes fixed on the wood grain of the table. His fingers tapped in nervous rhythm. Left hand. Always the left. I waited. He didn't deny it. I was going to tell you, he whispered. When? I asked, my voice shaking. Before or after the vacation with her? Still no answer. Hector, how long? He swallowed hard. 12 years, he said, barely audible. The world tilted. I grabbed the edge of the counter to keep from falling. 12 years. I repeated, stunned. You've been cheating on me for 12 years. He finally looked at me, really looked. His eyes were red, but I didn't care. My tears had dried up long ago. I never stopped loving you, Ayase, he said. You were sick. I didn't want to hurt you. I was going to end it, but then you didn't, I snapped. You let it go on. You lied to me every time you said you were going fishing. Every time you kissed my cheek. Every time you walked into this house and looked me in the eye. He rubbed his face, defeated. I didn't mean for it to happen, he muttered. She worked at one of the stores. Catalina. She was young, sweet. I was lonely, Ayase. You were in the hospital so much. I missed you. I missed us. So you replaced me, I said, my voice hollow. No, he said quickly. I didn't replace you. I lost myself. And then it was too late. I crossed my arms, suddenly cold. Do you love her? I asked. He hesitated. I love our life, he said. This life. With you. Catalina is something different. But she gave me a son. My stomach turned. A son, I whispered. He nodded. His name is Nico. He's 4. I pressed my hand to my chest, as if I could stop my heart from falling apart inside me. A child, another family, a secret kept so carefully while I battled for my life. You had a baby, I said slowly while I was in chemo. He couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, he said. You have to believe me. I never wanted to hurt you. I was going to come clean eventually. Eventually, I repeated. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. No, I said. And with that, I walked out of the kitchen, into the hallway, up the stairs, and into the guest room. I didn't pack that day. I didn't scream or break things. I simply folded. It was the quietest heartbreak I'd ever felt, but it was also the deepest. And it didn't stop hurting for a very, very long time. I didn't make a scene. That's not who I am. I waited until Hector left for work the next morning. Then I packed 3 bags, essentials only. A week's worth of clothes, my medications, a photo of Sophia when she was 6, and the pair of garden gloves I'd worn through every spring. I called my mother, told her I was coming to stay for a while. I didn't explain why. I didn't have the words. All I said was, I need to breathe somewhere else. She didn't ask questions. I left a note on the kitchen table, not for Hector, but for myself. It read, you still exist, even outside of this house. Then I walked out. The first few days felt unreal, like I was floating above my own life, watching someone else go through the motions. I stayed in my old childhood bedroom, the one with faded wallpaper and a creaky bed frame, and stared at the ceiling like it might offer answers. It didn't. Hector called. I let it ring. He texted. I didn't read them. He even came to the house once. I watched through the curtain as he stood at the front steps holding a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. He left after 10 minutes. Sophia didn't know at first. I told her I was helping Grandma with some errands. But eventually, the truth slipped out, probably from Hector. I don't know what he told her. I don't know how he spun 12 years of betrayal into something forgivable. But Sophia, she forgave him. She met Nico. She even sent me a photo of the 2 boys, Nico and Diego, playing with toy trucks in her backyard. She said, they don't know anything about what happened. They're just kids. That's how it should be. I nodded. She was right. But still, it broke me a little more. I stopped cooking. I stopped gardening. I didn't open the curtains for 3 weeks. My body moved through the hours, but my soul had curled into itself like a dying leaf. The only thing that kept me tethered to this world was Diego. Every evening, we'd FaceTime. He'd show me his drawings, ask me silly questions like whether dinosaurs ate pancakes. Once, he held up a crayon and said, "This is your favorite color, right, Grandma? The pink that looks like your flowers." I cried for 20 minutes after that call. My best friend, Rosa, came over with pan dulce and old photo albums. She didn't try to cheer me up. She just sat next to me and said, "You're allowed to fall apart, but don't stay there forever, not when there's still light to find." I wanted to believe her. I just didn't know how. Then, one evening, out of nowhere, Sophia said, "Mommy, Rosa's been wanting to take a little trip. Somewhere warm, by the ocean. I think you should go with her." I opened my mouth to protest, but she stopped me. "You gave everything to everyone," she said softly. "Let someone give something back to you now." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. The wind outside rustled through the trees like a whisper I couldn't quite make out. Maybe it was time to listen. Maybe healing doesn't begin with strength. Maybe it begins with surrender. We arrived in Corpus Christi on a Sunday afternoon, just before sunset. The sky was painted in soft oranges and smoky purples, and the air smelled of salt, sand, and something faintly sweet, like old mango trees and sun-warmed driftwood. Rosa had booked a little guest house a few blocks from the beach. Nothing fancy, just clean sheets, a squeaky porch swing, and a host named Marta who greeted us with cold hibiscus tea and too many stories. It was quiet, comfortably quiet, Every morning, Rosa and I would wake early, wrap ourselves in shawls, and walk barefoot along the shoreline before the sun rose fully. The ocean was never loud at that hour, just soft waves and seabirds and the occasional distant bark of a dog. That week, I didn't think about Hector. I didn't think about Catalina or Nico or Sophia's strange ability to forgive what I couldn't. I just breathed. I let the water kiss my ankles and the sand swallow my footsteps. And then, one afternoon, we wandered down to a small cafe by the pier. It wasn't flashy, just a whitewashed building with crooked wooden shutters and blue chairs scattered across a shaded patio. The sign read Ramirez Cafe, hand-painted in soft yellow. It smelled like roasted peppers, lime, and something on the grill that made Rosa sigh out loud. That's when we saw him. He was sweeping the front steps, wearing a plain t-shirt and worn-in jeans. Tan skin, silver at his temples, hands strong and sure. He looked up, and his eyes landed on us. Not in that way men sometimes do, but like he was genuinely taking note of who had arrived. "Ladies," he greeted with a warm smile. "You look like you've been walking forever. Come in. First meal's on me." Rosa nudged me with her elbow. "See, I told you something good would happen." I rolled my eyes but followed her inside. We sat near the window. The food was simple: grilled fish, warm tortillas, fresh avocado. Everything tasted like it had been made by someone who cared. Later, as we were leaving, he walked us to the door. "I'm Matteo," he said. "I own this place." "Isabella," I replied without thinking. "This is Rosa." His smile deepened just slightly. "Come back tomorrow. I make a mean mole on Mondays." We laughed. Rosa said something flirty. I said something polite. But as we walked away, I felt his eyes on me. Not in a possessive way, but thoughtful, curious. Not hungry, just human. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was thinking of Matteo, but because for the first time in months, I had shared a meal, a laugh, a name, and felt no shame. It was nothing, but it was also everything. And somehow I knew we would see him again. We did go back the next day, and the next, and the one after that. Matteo always greeted us with the same gentle smile, like he'd been expecting us. Like nothing in the world gave him more joy than the sight of two women in sun hats and sandals walking toward his crooked cafe. He didn't flirt. He didn't ask questions. He simply brought us coffee, fresh tortillas, and stories about his grandmother's recipes, how she taught him to cook by taste, not measurement, and how nothing good ever came from rushing the pot. Rosa adored him immediately. I think she saw something in him, a steadiness I hadn't seen in a man in a long time. One afternoon, while she napped, I returned to the cafe alone. I told myself it was for the food, but really it was the quiet, the way Matteo made space without filling it. He noticed the hesitation in my steps that day. As I sat down, he placed a small bowl in front of me. "Roasted corn soup with lime and herbs. It's not on the menu," he said, "but it's comfort in a bowl." I smiled. "You read minds now. Only hungry ones." We didn't talk much that meal, but as I sipped the soup, something inside me softened. I wasn't used to being seen without being studied, or being heard without being interrupted. When I finished, he brought over a small cup of cinnamon tea and sat across from me. "Want to tell me about him?" he asked gently. I looked out the window. The ocean shimmered in the distance. "I was married for 30 years, I said. "He cheated for 12. Had a whole second life. A son. He told me after I asked about a name on his phone." Matteo didn't flinch. He said he still loved me, I added, but not enough to stay faithful. Matteo stirred his own tea slowly. "That's not love," he said simply. I nodded, more to myself than to him. "I don't know who I am without that marriage," I confessed. "I don't know what I like to eat anymore, or what kind of music I prefer. I just existed inside someone else's orbit for so long, I forgot how to walk on my own." Matteo didn't rush to reply. He just sat there, steady, safe. Then he said, "You don't have to figure it out all at once. You're allowed to be a mystery even to yourself. Something about that made me exhale, like I'd been holding my breath since the moment I left home. For the next hour, we talked, not just about Hector, but about Garden's favorite childhood books, the smell of fresh laundry, and the way grief can sneak up in the middle of a perfectly normal Tuesday. I told him I used to paint, not well, but often. He told me about the lemon tree his daughter planted before she passed away. She was 12. We didn't cry. We just sat with the weight of things. And when I left that day, he said, "Come back when you want. Not when you feel ready, just when you want." That night, for the first time in months, I dreamt in color again. And in the morning, I reached for my sketch pad. When our week at the coast came to an end, Rosa asked if I wanted to extend the trip. I almost said yes, but something inside me whispered that it was time to go home. Not to the house I had shared with Hector, not to the life I had left behind, but to something else entirely, something I hadn't yet defined. Before we left, I returned to the cafe one last time. Mateo was out front, pruning a stubborn rose bush that refused to bloom. "I was hoping I'd see you," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "I wanted to say goodbye," I told him, "and thank you." He tilted his head. "For the soup." "For seeing me," I said. He smiled, and it was the kind that made you feel like maybe the world wasn't such a cruel place after all. "I hope you keep painting," he said, "even if it's just for you." I nodded. "I hope you keep growing that rose." He chuckled. "Stubborn things. But I think it's just waiting for the right season." I left without promises. That was important to me. No promises, no pressure, no fairy tale ending. Just peace. When I returned to San Antonio, Sophia was waiting at my mother's house. She hugged me tightly and didn't let go for a full minute. "I missed you," she whispered. I believed her. We talked that night, not just about Hector, but about boundaries and pain and how forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. She told me she still visits Nico, that Diego loves him, that she hopes one day I might meet him. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said maybe. Weeks passed, then months. I didn't return to Hector's house. I didn't answer his last letter. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want an apology. The life we had built together had already crumbled. Not with an explosion, but with time and silence. I got my own apartment near the botanical gardens. Small, quiet, sun-drenched. I painted again, badly at first, but every brushstroke felt like a heartbeat, like proof that I was still here, still capable of creating something that was mine. Rosa came by every Saturday with flowers and fresh gossip. Mateo called once in December, just to check in, just to say hello. We didn't speak often, but when we did, it felt like home. I never told anyone when exactly it happened, when the anger faded, when the sorrow settled, when I finally exhaled without pain. It wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. I had just watered my plants and was sipping coffee on the porch when I realized the weight on my chest was gone, like someone had finally opened a window I didn't know was sealed shut. That afternoon, I picked up Diego from school. He ran toward me with the biggest smile and shouted, "Grandma, I drew you!" It was a picture of a garden with big pink flowers and a little cafe with a heart on the sign. "Is that me?" I asked, pointing at the woman in the drawing. "No," he said seriously. "That's you and the nice man with the soup." I laughed until my ribs ached. And later that night, when the house was still and quiet, I took out a fresh canvas. I painted something new. Not a memory, not a man, not a rose, just light, soft, golden, spilling out from a window cracked open, just enough. It looked like freedom. It looked like me.